Emma Rodriguez had always been the kind of kid who picked up stray cats and brought home injured birds. Her mother often joked that their house looked more like a wildlife hospital than a home, but nothing could have prepared the 8-year-old for what she would find buried under the twisted metal and smoking debris scattered across the mountain meadow that Tuesday afternoon. The alien ship had crashed 3 days earlier. The news called it a meteorite impact, but Emma knew better. She had seen the strange lights dancing in the sky, heard the terrible screaming sound as something huge tore through the atmosphere above their small Colorado town. While the adults argued about government cover-ups and military cordons, Emma had slipped away from her backyard and followed the deer trail up into the mountains. The wreckage stretched across the valley like the skeleton of some impossible beast. Chunks of metal that seemed to shift color in the sunlight lay scattered between the pine trees. Strange symbols glowed faintly on curved panels, and the air itself felt different here, thicker somehow, charged with energy that made her skin tingle. Emma picked her way carefully through the debris, her sneakers crunching on crystallized dirt that had been turned to glass by intense heat. She was looking for anything interesting, maybe a piece small enough to fit in her backpack that she could show her parents later. Instead, she found something that would change her life forever. The egg sat in a small crater, perfectly intact despite the violence that had brought it here. It was about the size of a football, deep purple with veins of silver that pulsed with their own inner light. The surface was warm to the touch and completely smooth like polished stone. Emma knew immediately that this was not something that belonged to Earth. She should have left it there, should have run home and told her parents what she had found. But something about the egg called to her, a feeling she could not put into words. It seemed lonely somehow, abandoned and forgotten in the wreckage of its former home. Before she could think twice, Emma carefully lifted the egg and cradled it in her arms. The egg was lighter than she expected, and it hummed softly against her chest as she carried it home. She hid it in her bedroom closet, wrapped in old blankets, behind her winter clothes. For 3 days she visited it every few hours, watching the silver veins pulse faster and brighter. On the 3rd night, the humming stopped. Emma woke to a soft cracking sound. She crept to her closet and found the egg split down the middle, revealing a creature that took her breath away. The baby dragon was no bigger than her mother's cat, with scales that shifted from deep purple to silver in the lamplight. Its eyes were huge and golden, filled with an intelligence that seemed far older than its tiny body. Small wings fluttered weakly as it struggled to free itself from the broken shell. The moment their eyes met, something extraordinary happened. The little dragon stopped struggling and stared at Emma with complete focus. Its mouth opened in what looked like a smile, revealing tiny white teeth. It made a sound that was part chirp, part purr, and purely joyful. Then it did something that made Emma gasp in surprise. The dragon tried to stand on its hind legs, wobbling dangerously as it attempted to walk upright like she did. It took 3 clumsy steps before tumbling forward, landing in a heap of scales, and squeaking in frustration. Emma giggled despite her shock, and the sound seemed to encourage the little creature. It tried again, then again, each attempt ending in another spectacular tumble. Emma named him Goofy because of the way he fell over his own feet every time he tried to copy her movements. Over the next few hours, she watched in amazement as Goofy studied everything she did and tried to imitate it. When she sat cross-legged on the floor, he folded his wings and arranged himself in the same position. When she picked up a book, he grabbed a sock in his tiny claws and held it the same way, his golden eyes moving back and forth as if he were reading. The most remarkable thing was how he tried to eat. Emma brought him a bowl of water and some crackers, not knowing what a baby dragon might need. Goofy sniffed the crackers with interest, then watched carefully as Emma demonstrated how to pick one up and bite it. He tried to copy her, gripping a cracker awkwardly in his claws and bringing it to his mouth. The cracker caught fire the moment it touched his lips, crumbling to ash. Goofy looked so disappointed that Emma's heart melted. She tried giving him different foods, but everything burst into flames the moment it met his natural dragon fire. Goofy grew more and more frustrated, making sad little whimpering sounds as each meal turned to ash. Finally, Emma had an idea. She got a metal spoon from the kitchen and showed him how to hold it. The spoon melted within seconds, But Goofy understood what she was trying to teach him. He began experimenting with different ways to control his fire, his little face scrunched up in concentration. By morning, Emma knew she could not keep Goofy secret any longer. Her parents would discover him soon enough, and she needed their help to figure out how to care for a baby dragon who thought he was human. She found them in the kitchen, her mother reading the news on her tablet while her father made breakfast. Dr. Maria Rodriguez was used to her daughter bringing home unusual creatures, but nothing had prepared her for this. When Emma walked into the kitchen with Goofy perched on her shoulder, trying to maintain his balance while standing on his hind legs like a tiny person, both parents froze in shock. Goofy took one look at Emma's parents and immediately tried to behave like what he thought was proper human behavior. He climbed down from her shoulder, attempted a wobbly bow, and made a series of chirping sounds that seemed to follow the rhythm of human speech. Then he walked over to the breakfast table, pulled out a chair with great effort and tried to sit in it like he had seen humans do in Emma's picture books. Captain Ben Rodriguez recovered first. His military training kicked in, and he began asking Emma rapid questions about where she had found Goofy and whether anyone else knew about him. But Dr. Rodriguez was already fascinated. As a xenobiologist, she had spent years studying the possibility of alien life. Now that life was sitting at her breakfast table, trying to figure out how to use a napkin, the family spent the morning learning about their new house guest. Goofy followed Emma everywhere, copying her movements and trying to participate in human activities. He attempted to brush his teeth, tangling himself in the toothbrush strings. He tried to put on clothes, getting completely lost inside one of Emma's t-shirts. Every failure only made him more determined to succeed. Dr. Rodriguez ran some basic tests and confirmed what they all suspected. Goofy was definitely not from Earth, but he showed no signs of disease or aggression. In fact, his behavior suggested an intelligence level far beyond any Earth creature, combined with an absolute devotion to mimicking human behavior. He had imprinted on Emma completely, seeing her not just as his caretaker but as his template for how to be. The real revelation came when they visited the crash site together. Hidden in the wreckage, they found a partially functional AI system that had survived the crash. The artificial intelligence was weak but still operational, and it told them a story that changed everything they thought they knew about their new family member. Goofy was a Drakari, a species known throughout the Ndawio galaxy for their fierce independence and warrior nature. But he had been just an egg when the research ship crashed, and in the absence of his own kind, he had done what young Drakari do naturally in the wild. He had imprinted on the first intelligent being he encountered, adopting their behavior patterns as his own template for survival. The AI warned them that others would come looking for Goofy eventually. The Drakari were valuable to many alien species, and a young one would be considered a prize beyond measure. But for now, Goofy was safe, learning to be human one clumsy step at a time, following Emma Rodriguez everywhere she went, and believing with all his dragon heart that he was just like her. Life with a baby dragon who believed he was human proved more challenging than the Rodriguez family had ever imagined. 6 months after hatching, Goofy had grown from the size of a house cat to something resembling a large golden retriever, though his attempts to behave like a human had only become more determined and creative. Every morning began the same way. Emma would wake to find Goofy trying to sleep in a human position in his specially reinforced bed, his tail hanging over the edge and his wings folded awkwardly around himself like blankets. He insisted on wearing pajamas, though they had to be specially made from fire-resistant materials after he accidentally incinerated his first 3 pairs during nightmares about flying. The real problem started when Emma returned to school. Goofy had spent every moment of the summer following her around the house, learning to navigate stairs by walking upright, practicing table manners with increasingly expensive silverware, and attempting to read books by mimicking her eye movements. The idea of separation had never occurred to him. On the first day of 3rd grade, Goofy simply followed Emma to the bus stop. When she tried to explain that dragons did not go to school, he sat down on the sidewalk and gave her a look of such confusion and hurt that her heart broke. His golden eyes seemed to ask why she was excluding him from this human activity he had never seen before. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Peterson, nearly fainted when she saw a dragon-shaped head peek through the classroom window during math class. Goofy had apparently followed the school bus by running through the forest, keeping pace easily with his powerful legs. He pressed his snout against the glass and made soft, whimpering sounds, clearly distressed at being separated from Emma. 2. School called Emma's parents, the fire department, animal control, and eventually the military. By the time the adults finished arguing about what to do, Goofy had figured out how to open the window latch with his claws and climbed into the classroom. He immediately went to Emma's desk, picked up a crayon in his mouth, and began trying to copy the letters she was writing on her worksheet. The other children were divided between terror and fascination. Goofy, however, was delighted to meet more small humans. He went from desk to desk, examining their work with genuine interest and trying to participate in the lesson. When little Bobby Martinez dropped his pencil, Goofy carefully picked it up and returned it, his tail wagging like an enthusiastic dog. That evening, the Rodriguez family received an unexpected visitor. A sleek black aircraft landed silently in their backyard, and from it emerged a being that looked like a cross between a lizard and a rhinoceros. Ambassador Krex Vorthak wore elaborate armor and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most dangerous creature in any room. Krex spoke perfect English, though his voice sounded like gravel being stirred in a metal bucket. He explained that he represented the Hegemony Coalition, a powerful alliance of species that controlled much of the local galaxy. The Coalition had been tracking the crashed research vessel, and their sensors had detected Drakari life signs at this location. Dr. Rodriguez invited the alien ambassador inside, though the furniture creaked ominously under his weight. Krex looked around the human home with obvious disdain, his large eyes taking in the family photos, Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, and the specially modified food bowls that Goofy used for meals. Goofy was in the living room when Krex entered, carefully practicing human handwriting with a modified pen. The moment he saw the Coalition ambassador, every instinct should have told him he was looking at a fellow sapient being, perhaps even a potential ally. Instead, Goofy took one look at Krex and scrambled behind Emma's chair, making himself as small as possible. Krex stared in disbelief. According to every piece of data in the Coalition database, Drakari were proud warriors who feared nothing in the universe. They were apex predators, natural leaders who commanded respect from every species they encountered. Yet here was a young Drakari cowering behind a small human child like a frightened pet. Emma sensed Goofy's fear and immediately moved to protect him. She stood up from her chair and placed herself between the alien ambassador and her dragon brother. Her small hands clenched into fists. Krex found this display amusing until Goofy spoke his first clear words. "No go with scary lizard," Goofy said, his voice high and frightened but unmistakably speaking English. "Stay with Emma, sister. Stay with family." The room fell silent. Dr. Rodriguez nearly dropped her coffee cup, while Captain Rodriguez slowly reached for his sidearm. They had all known Goofy was intelligent, but none of them had realized he was learning to speak by listening to their conversations. Krex was even more shocked than the humans. Not only was a Drakari speaking an alien language, but he was claiming kinship with another species and refusing to acknowledge his heritage. This went against everything the Coalition knew about Drakari psychology. The ambassador tried a different approach. He activated a holographic display that showed images of magnificent Drakari warriors soaring through space, their scales gleaming as they commanded vast fleets and conquered entire star systems. He spoke of glory, power, and the respect that Goofy could earn if he embraced his true nature. Goofy watched the display with interest, but when Krex finished speaking, the young dragon shook his head. He pointed to Emma and said, "Family here. Learn human ways. Be good human like Emma's sister." Krex's patience finally snapped. He stood to his full height, towering over the human family, and declared that the Coalition would not be denied their property. The Drakari was a valuable military asset, and primitive mammals had no right to corrupt his development with their backwards culture. That was when Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. His military bearing was evident as he told Krex that Earth did not recognize the Coalition's authority over any being who chose to remain here freely. Goofy was not property to be claimed. but a sentient individual with the right to decide his own fate. Emma added her voice to her father's, though her words were simpler and more direct. She told Crex that Goofy was her brother now, and no one was going to take him away. Goofy himself nodded emphatically and added, "Earth home now. Human family now." The confrontation escalated when Crex threatened to bring coalition warships to enforce their claim. Dr. Rodriguez calmly informed him that Earth's governments were already aware of the situation, and that any aggressive action would be considered an act of war against a developing species under galactic protection protocols. Crex laughed at this, pointing out that humans had no allies among the spacefaring civilizations and no technology capable of resisting coalition forces. But his confidence wavered when he realized that his casual threats had triggered something unexpected in Goofy. The young dragon stepped out from behind Emma's chair, and for the first time since Crex's arrival, he stood up straight. His golden eyes blazed with an inner fire, and his small wings spread wide. When he spoke again, his voice carried harmonics that had not been there before, sounds that resonated with deep power. "Not hurt, family," Goofy said, each word carefully pronounced. "Not take from Emma's sister. You go now." Crex felt something he had not experienced in decades, genuine surprise. The young Drakari was not just speaking, he was projecting authority, in a way that triggered instinctive responses in the ambassador's own predator brain. This was not the behavior of a corrupted or weakened individual, but of a Drakari who had found something worth protecting. The ambassador left that night, but not before warning the Rodriguez family that the coalition would return with greater force. As his ship disappeared into the star-filled sky, Goofy curled up next to Emma on the couch and said quietly, "Scared of Lizard Man, but more scared of leaving family." Dr. Rodriguez spent the following weeks researching everything she could find about Drakari psychology and development. What she discovered both fascinated and worried her. The species was known for their intense social bonding during their early years, adopting the cultural patterns of their community as their fundamental identity markers. But no one had ever studied what happened when a Drakari imprinted on an entirely different species. Goofy was not just learning human behaviors, he was integrating them into his core identity in ways that were creating something entirely new. He was becoming a bridge between two species, carrying the intelligence and instincts of his dragon heritage while embracing the cooperative and protective nature of human culture. The coalition returned sooner than expected, but this time they came with different intentions. Instead of threats and demands, they brought scientists and cultural specialists who wanted to study the unprecedented phenomenon of a Drakari who had voluntarily adopted alien cultural patterns. Goofy met their interest with polite cooperation, but he never wavered in his fundamental position. He was Emma's brother, a member of the Rodriguez family, and a human in all the ways that truly mattered to him. The scientists could study him all they wanted, but they would not change his mind about who he was or where he belonged. As winter arrived in Colorado, Goofy had grown large enough that he could no longer fit through normal doorways without ducking. His scales had developed a permanent shimmer that shifted between purple and silver depending on his mood, and small horns had begun to emerge from his forehead. But every morning, he still tried to sleep in human positions, still attempted to use silverware despite constantly melting it, and still followed Emma Rodriguez everywhere she went, believing with absolute certainty that he was exactly who he was meant to be. 2 years had passed since Emma first found Goofy in the crashed alien ship, and the changes in both of them were remarkable. Emma had grown into a confident 10-year-old who spoke 3 alien languages and could explain xenobiology, concepts that confused most adults. Goofy had grown even more dramatically, now standing as tall as Emma when he walked upright on his hind legs, which he insisted on doing whenever possible. The most surprising development was how completely Goofy had integrated into human society. After months of negotiations between Earth governments and various alien species, special accommodations had been made for him to attend school. His desk was reinforced steel, his pencils were made from heat-resistant ceramics, and his textbooks were printed on fireproof materials, but otherwise he was just another student in Emma's class. Goofy had become something of a celebrity at Pine Valley Elementary. He participated in math competitions by working out problems on a specially designed tablet that could survive his naturally warm touch. During art class, he created sculptures by carefully breathing controlled flames to shape clay and metal in ways that amazed his teachers. Most remarkably, he had learned to play soccer, though the school had to keep several backup balls on hand since his enthusiasm sometimes resulted in accidental incineration. His language skills had developed far beyond simple communication. Goofy now spoke English with the same fluency as any human child his age, though he still occasionally used formal phrasing that he had picked up from the academic papers his mother brought home. He had also retained his natural ability to understand other alien languages, making him an invaluable translator when various species came to study the unprecedented case of cross-species cultural adoption. The real test of how much Goofy had changed came on a Tuesday morning in March when the coalition returned in force. This time they brought not just Ambassador Krex, but an entire diplomatic fleet that hung in Earth's orbit like a collection of metal stars. The message they broadcast was simple. They wanted their Drakari back, and they were prepared to take him by force if necessary. President Martinez called an emergency session at the United Nations, while Admiral Foster mobilized Earth's newly developed space defense network. The past 2 years had not been wasted. Human technology had advanced rapidly with help from friendly alien species who were curious about the Goofy phenomenon, and Earth was no longer the defenseless world that Krex had first threatened. But the most important preparation had been Goofy's own development. Working with human engineers and alien technical specialists, he had learned to interface directly with both human and alien computer systems. His unique neural structure allowed him to process information in ways that neither species could achieve alone, creating solutions that surprised everyone involved. The demonstration that changed everything took place in the main auditorium of the United Nations building. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to witness what the coalition claimed would be proof that human influence had damaged Goofy's natural abilities. Instead, they saw something that challenged every assumption about species limitations and cultural boundaries. Goofy walked onto the stage wearing a specially designed suit that allowed his wings to move freely while maintaining the formal appearance that human diplomacy required. He moved with the confident grace of a young dragon, but his behavior was unmistakably human in its courtesy and consideration for others. The first test involved language translation. The coalition representatives spoke in 12 different alien languages, expecting Goofy to struggle with the complex diplomatic terminology and cultural nuances. Instead, he not only translated each language perfectly, but he also explained the cultural context behind various phrases and suggested more effective ways for the different species to communicate with each other. The second test was even more impressive. Engineers brought out a series of technological puzzles that required understanding of both human and alien engineering principles. Goofy studied each device carefully, then began combining human problem-solving approaches with Drakari, intuitive understanding of energy systems. Within minutes, he had solved problems that had stumped teams of specialists for months. But the most remarkable demonstration came when they brought in a group of elementary school children from around the world. Goofy spent an hour teaching them basic concepts about space travel, alien cultures, and interspecies cooperation. He explained complex ideas in simple terms, used humor to keep their attention, and showed infinite patience when they asked the same questions multiple times. Most importantly, he treated each child with the same respect and kindness that Emma had shown him during his first days on Earth. Ambassador Krex watched this display with growing confusion. Everything in Coalition records suggested that Drakari were solitary creatures who valued individual achievement above all else. They were known for their pride, their fierce independence, and their complete inability to subordinate themselves to the needs of a group. Yet here was Goofy, clearly demonstrating advanced Drakari abilities while simultaneously exhibiting behavior patterns that were purely human in their emphasis on cooperation and care for others. The confusion deepened when Krex tried to interview Goofy privately. He expected to find signs that the young Drakari was suppressing his true nature, that human influence had created internal conflict or psychological damage. Instead, he found a being who was completely comfortable with his hybrid identity. "I understand why you are confused," Goofy told the ambassador, speaking with the careful politeness that Emma's parents had taught him. "Your records show what Drakari are like when they grow up with other Drakari, but I did not grow up that way. I learned to be intelligent from watching Emma study. I learned to be strong from watching her father protect our family. I learned to be kind from watching her mother care for injured animals." Krex pressed harder, asking whether Goofy ever felt incomplete or wondered what he might have become if he had been raised among his own kind. The young dragon considered this question seriously before answering. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to fly among the stars with other dragons," he admitted. "But then I think about Emma's smile when I help her with her homework, or the way her parents say goodnight to both of us before bed. I think about my friends at school who accept me even though I accidentally melt things sometimes. These experiences made me who I am. I would not trade them for anything." The real breakthrough came when Coalition scientists tried to measure Goofy's combat capabilities. Traditional Drakari testing involved individual trials of strength, speed, and fire intensity. Goofy participated in these tests, but his performance was puzzling. His raw abilities were impressive, but not exceptional by Drakari standards. The scientists concluded that human influence had somehow weakened his development. They were wrong. The truth became apparent during an unexpected emergency, when a fire broke out in the building's lower levels during the diplomatic meetings. While the various alien representatives argued about evacuation procedures, and humans struggled with equipment that was not designed for the building's alien modifications, Goofy simply acted. He did not attempt to handle the emergency alone, as a traditional Drakari would have done. Instead, he immediately began coordinating with human firefighters, using his flame immunity to enter areas they could not reach, while relaying information about structural damage and trapped individuals. He used his strength to clear debris, his flying ability to reach high areas, and his heat vision to locate people through smoke. But every action was part of a coordinated team effort. Most impressively, when the situation became critical and normal equipment failed, Goofy did something that no Drakari in recorded history had ever done. He voluntarily shared his fire, breathing controlled bursts of energy that powered emergency equipment and provided light for rescue operations. This required not just technical skill, but absolute trust in the humans working alongside him. The rescue operation was a complete success with no casualties and minimal property damage. But more importantly, it demonstrated that Goofy had not lost any of his Drakari abilities. Instead, he had learned to use them in ways that amplified the capabilities of those around him, creating combined effectiveness that exceeded what either species could achieve alone. Ambassador Krex found himself in an unprecedented situation. The Coalition had sent him to retrieve a damaged Drakari who needed to be restored to proper behavior patterns. Instead, he had discovered a being who represented an entirely new evolutionary possibility. Goofy was not a weakened dragon or a confused alien, but something that had never existed before, a bridge between species who carried the best qualities of both. The diplomatic meetings concluded with an agreement that satisfied no one completely, but respected everyone's core interests. The Coalition acknowledged Goofy's right to remain on Earth and choose his own identity. Earth governments agreed to allow Coalition scientists to study the cultural integration process, provided that Goofy's consent was obtained for any research. Most importantly, Goofy himself was recognized as the first official interspecies cultural ambassador, a position that had never existed before, but now seemed essential for future cooperation between humans and aliens. As the various ships departed Earth's orbit, Goofy stood with Emma on the observation deck of the United Nations building, watching the stars fade into the dawn sky. He had grown large enough that his head now reached Emma's shoulder when he stood upright, and his scales had developed intricate patterns that shifted between purple, silver, and gold, depending on his emotions. "Do you ever regret choosing to stay human?" Emma asked, using the private question that had become their way of checking in with each other during difficult times. Goofy considered the question with the same seriousness he brought to all important matters. "I did not choose to stay human," he finally answered. "I chose to become myself, and myself includes being your brother, Emma Rodriguez." Emma smiled and reached up to scratch behind his small horns, a gesture that never failed to make his tail wag with happiness. Tomorrow they would go back to school, where Goofy would continue his unique education in being both dragon and human. But tonight, they were simply a brother and sister watching the stars and planning their next adventure together. The visitor arrived on a sunny Thursday afternoon in May, 3 years after the great diplomatic crisis that had established Goofy as Earth's first interspecies ambassador. Emma was now 13, dealing with the usual challenges of middle school, while also managing her unique role as sister to the galaxy's most famous dragon. Goofy had grown magnificent during these years, now standing taller than most adult humans when he chose to walk upright, with wings that could span the width of their living room and scales that shimmered like liquid starlight. The ship that landed in their backyard was unlike any vessel the Rodriguez family had seen before. Where coalition ships were angular and militaristic, this craft was graceful and organic, its hull carved with flowing patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner rhythm. From it emerged a being that made even Goofy stop and stare in wonder. Vera was everything that Goofy was not. Where he had learned to move with careful human consideration for furniture and fragile objects, she flowed through space with the natural grace of a creature born to command the sky. Her scales were deep emerald green shot through with veins of gold, and when she spread her wings they cast shadows that danced with their own light. Most striking of all were her eyes, which held the ancient pride and fierce independence that every Drakari was born with. She had come, she explained in a voice like distant thunder, to offer Goofy what the coalition had failed to provide. Choice made with full knowledge of what he was giving up. The coalition had agreed to this approach after years of studying the recordings from Goofy's earlier demonstrations. If he truly understood what it meant to be Drakari and still chose his human family, they would consider the matter closed forever. Vyra wasted no time in showing Goofy the power he had never learned to claim. In the wide meadow behind their house, she demonstrated abilities that left the entire family speechless. Her fire was not the careful, controlled flame that Goofy had learned to produce for human purposes, but plasma hot enough to melt stone and metal. She moved through the air like liquid lightning, performing maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. Most impressively, she reached out with her mind and spoke directly to the consciousness of every living thing within a mile radius, a form of telepathic communication that was the birthright of every mature Drakari. Goofy watched these demonstrations with growing awareness of what his human upbringing had cost him. He could fly, but not with Vyra's effortless mastery. He could breathe fire, but not with the devastating intensity that came naturally to his species. He was strong and intelligent, but he had never learned to project the natural authority that made other beings instinctively submit to Drakari will. For the first time in his life, Goofy began to question his choices. Vera did not mock his human behaviors or criticize his family, but her very presence made him feel small and incomplete. She spoke of star systems where Drakari ruled as benevolent kings, of knowledge and power beyond anything Earth's primitive science could offer, of a destiny written in his very genes that he had traded away for the affection of creatures who would live and die in the blink of a dragon's eye. Emma watched her brother's growing uncertainty with a heavy heart. She could see the longing in his golden eyes when Vera spoke of soaring between planets, of the respect and fear that Drakari commanded throughout the galaxy, of powers that could reshape reality itself. For the first time since they had been together, Emma wondered if her love for Goofy had been selfish, if she had kept him from becoming who he was truly meant to be. The crisis came during Emma's school science fair, where Goofy had been planning to demonstrate principles of interstellar navigation using a combination of human mathematics and Drakari intuitive understanding. The presentation had been going well, with parents and teachers marveling at the elegant way Goofy explained complex concepts, when a group of anti-alien protesters broke through security and began threatening the children. The protesters were members of a fringe group that believed all alien contact was dangerous to humanity. They had chosen the school event specifically because they knew Goofy would be there, hoping to create an incident that would turn public opinion against interspecies cooperation. Their plan was simple: threaten human children and film goofies. Reaction: proving that dragons could not be trusted around the young and vulnerable. What they had not expected was how their presence would affect Goofy's carefully controlled nature. For years, he had suppressed his predator instincts in order to fit into human society. He had learned to be gentle, patient, and cooperative because those were the values his family had taught him. But when the protesters grabbed Emma and held a weapon to her throat while demanding that all aliens leave Earth forever, something ancient and terrible awakened in Goofy's consciousness. The rage that flooded through him was not human anger, which burns hot and fast before cooling. This was dragon fury, primal and devastating, the wrath of a creature designed to be the apex predator of any environment it entered. His scales shifted from their usual silver purple to deep crimson. His eyes blazed like miniature suns, and when he roared, windows shattered throughout the school building. For a terrifying moment, Goofy forgot everything he had learned about being human. He saw only threats to his family and felt only the need to eliminate them with maximum force. His wings spread to their full span, blocking out the sun, and he began to gather the kind of plasma fire that could reduce the entire building to ash. Every instinct screamed at him to unleash his full power, to show these insignificant mammals what it meant to threaten a dragon's kin. Emma's voice cut through the red haze of his fury like a knife through silk. "Goofy, please," she called, her voice steady despite the weapon at her throat. "Remember who you are. Remember what we taught you." The simple words hit Goofy like a physical blow. He saw himself as if from outside, wings spread in threat, fire gathered for destruction, every line of his body screaming murder and dominance. This was what Vera had been offering him, the power to solve problems through superior force, to command respect through fear. It felt magnificent and terrible and completely wrong. Goofy forced his wings to fold, made his fire die back to harmless warmth, and spoke to the protesters in the same careful, polite voice he used with his teachers. "Please let my sister go," he said, each word precisely pronounced. "I know you are afraid, but hurting children will not solve anything. We can talk about your concerns like reasonable people." The protesters had expected violence or submission, not negotiation from a creature that could have killed them all, without effort. Their confusion gave security forces time to surround them, and the crisis ended without bloodshed. But Goofy knew that something fundamental had changed. He had felt the dragon rage, understood what it offered, and chosen to remain human in the most important moment of his life. Vera had witnessed the entire incident, and her reaction surprised everyone. Instead of disappointment or contempt, she looked at Goofy with something approaching admiration. That evening, as they sat together in the meadow behind the Rodriguez house, she spoke about power in ways that challenged everything the Coalition had taught about Drakari nature. "I have destroyed armies," she told him, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "I have conquered star systems and bent entire species to my will. But I have never done what you did today. I could not have chosen restraint when my family was threatened. I could not have offered peace to those who meant me harm. You have learned something that no Drakari has ever mastered." Goofy listened carefully, but his response came from the heart Emma's family had helped him build rather than the pride that his species was known for. "Power means nothing if you use it to hurt people who cannot defend themselves," he said. "Emma taught me that being strong means protecting those who are weaker, not dominating them. Her parents taught me that real authority comes from earning respect, not demanding it through fear." Vira stayed for 3 more days, spending time with the Rodriguez family and observing how they lived together. She saw how Goofy helped Emma with her homework, how he assisted his parents with household tasks that required his unique abilities, how he treated every human he met with the same courtesy and consideration. Most remarkably, she saw how the humans treated him in return, not as a powerful being to be feared or appeased, but as a beloved family member whose happiness mattered more than his utility. On her final evening, Vira made an offer that shocked everyone. She could take Goofy with her to the Drakari homeworlds, where he would be honored as a prince among his people. He would learn to use his full powers, command fleets of starships, and rule over species that had never known defeat. But she would also ensure that Earth remained under Drakari protection, that the Rodriguez family lived in comfort and safety for the rest of their natural lives. It was everything Goofy could have wanted, the perfect compromise between his dragon heritage and his human heart. He could become the powerful being he was born to be while ensuring that those he loved remained safe and happy. The choice should have been easy. Instead, Goofy took Emma's hand and looked into her worried eyes. "If I become a dragon prince, ruling from the stars," he asked quietly, "who will help you with your algebra homework? Who will walk you to school when the bullies are bothering you? Who will sit with you when you have nightmares about growing up too fast?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady when she answered, "I want you to be happy, Goof. I want you to become everything you're supposed to be, even if that means leaving us behind." Goofy smiled, the expression somehow managing to look both completely human and unmistakably draconic. "I am everything I am supposed to be," he said. "I am Emma Rodriguez's brother. I am Maria and Ben Rodriguez's son. I am a student at Pine Valley Middle School and Earth's interspecies ambassador. I am also a dragon who breathes fire and flies among the clouds. But most importantly, I am exactly who I choose to be." Vira departed the next morning, but not before telling Goofy something that would stay with him forever. "The Coalition was wrong about what makes a Drakari strong," she said. "It is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to know when not to use that power. You have taught me something today that I will carry back to our home world. Perhaps other young dragons will learn that there are many ways to be proud of what we are." As her ship disappeared into the morning sky, Goofy stood with his human family and felt complete for the first time since Vira's arrival. He had seen what he could become if he embraced his dragon nature fully, and he had chosen instead to remain something new and unprecedented. He was not fully human and not fully dragon, but he was entirely himself. The invasion fleet appeared in Earth's skies on a cold December morning, 5 years after Vira's departure. Emma was now 18, preparing for college while working part-time as a junior researcher in her mother's xenobiology lab. Goofy had reached full maturity, standing nearly 8 feet tall with wings that could carry him faster than most aircraft. Yet every morning he still tried to fit into his old desk at the kitchen table, insisting on having breakfast with his family before beginning his duties as Earth's chief interspecies ambassador. The Coalition ships were different this time, sleek and predatory, where the previous vessels had been merely intimidating. Ambassador Krex had been replaced by War Commander Thex, a being whose scarred armor told the story of 100 conquered worlds. The message they broadcast was simple and final. Earth had 3 days to surrender the corrupted Drakari or face complete annihilation. Everything had changed in the 5 years since Goofy's last encounter with his birth species. Reports had reached the Coalition homeworlds about a dragon who chose cooperation over conquest, who had turned down the chance to rule in favor of remaining with an inferior species. To the Coalition leadership, this represented a dangerous infection that threatened the fundamental order of galactic civilization. If one Drakari could reject their nature and find happiness among lesser beings, what would stop others from following the same path? The Coalition's power structure depended on species maintaining their traditional roles, with the strong dominating the weak and the intelligent ruling the simple. Goofy's very existence challenged this order in ways that could not be tolerated. War. Commander Thex made this clear during his first transmission to Earth's leaders. "The creature you call Goofy represents a philosophical virus that threatens galactic stability," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "We will not allow his perverted ideas about cooperation and equality to spread to other species. Surrender him now, and your world will be allowed to exist as a Coalition client state. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why dragons have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. President Martinez, now in her second term and experienced in alien relations, responded with diplomatic language that carried an iron core. Earth would not surrender any citizen to foreign powers, regardless of their species or origin. If the Coalition wished to pursue legal claims regarding Goofy's status, they could do so through established interstellar courts. But Earth would not be intimidated into abandoning its principles. Admiral Foster, whose space defense network had grown considerably since the Coalition's first visit, was more direct. Earth was no longer the defenseless world that Krex had first threatened. Human technology had advanced rapidly with assistance from friendly alien species who were fascinated by the Goofy phenomenon. More importantly, Earth now had allies among the galactic community, species who had witnessed the success of human-alien cooperation and wanted to explore similar possibilities. But the real change was in Goofy himself. The years of serving as Earth's ambassador had taught him lessons that no Drakari education could have provided. He had learned to think strategically on a galactic scale while maintaining the human values that defined his core identity. He had also learned something that would prove crucial in the coming conflict: how to inspire others to fight not for conquest or survival, but for the idea that different species could choose to become something better together. The Coalition's first mistake was assuming that Earth would face them alone. Within hours of Thex's ultimatum, ships began arriving from a dozen different species who had established friendly relations with Earth through their interactions with Goofy. The Tenthari brought their advanced shield technology. The Mexari contributed their expertise in space combat tactics, and the peaceful Lirani offered their remarkable ability to coordinate complex, multi-species operations. None of these allies could match the Coalition's raw firepower, but together they represented something unprecedented in galactic history: a voluntary alliance based on mutual respect rather than fear or domination. They had come not because Earth could offer them anything valuable, but because they believed in what Goofy represented. The second mistake was underestimating how much human military thinking had evolved during the years of alien contact. Admiral Foster had spent countless hours working with Goofy to understand how different species approached warfare, and together they had developed tactics that combined the best aspects of both human and alien strategic thinking. Traditional space combat relied on individual ships proving their superiority through direct confrontation, with the strongest vessels claiming victory through overwhelming force. Human military doctrine emphasized coordination, adaptability, and the willingness to accept losses in service of larger strategic goals. The combination of these approaches, refined through years of joint exercises with allied species, had created something entirely new. But the most important factor was Goofy himself. He had grown into his full powers during the peaceful years, but unlike any Drakari before him, he had learned to use those abilities as part of a larger team rather than as a lone apex predator. His unique combination of dragon instincts and human training made him perfectly suited to coordinate the kind of complex multi-species defense that the situation required. The battle began at the edge of Earth's solar system, where Coalition scouts encountered the first line of human and allied defenses. War Commander Thex expected a brief skirmish followed by rapid surrender when the defenders realized the futility of resistance. Instead, he found himself facing a defensive network that seemed to anticipate his every move. Goofy was at the center of that network, not as a lone warrior but as the coordinator who helped different species work together in ways none of them could achieve alone. His dragon senses could detect enemy movements across vast distances, while his human training allowed him to communicate tactical information in ways that every species could understand and act upon. The Coalition forces were powerful and experienced, but they had never faced an enemy that fought as a truly unified force. Every time they concentrated their attacks on what appeared to be a weak point, they found themselves surrounded by ships from multiple species working in perfect coordination. When they tried to use their superior individual firepower to break through the defensive lines, they discovered that their enemies were willing to sacrifice individual vessels to protect the overall formation. The turning point came when Thex decided to demonstrate Coalition power by targeting Earth's orbital stations directly. He expected the defenders to break formation to protect their home, creating the opening his forces needed to achieve victory through superior strength. Instead, something happened that had never been recorded in any military database. Goofy performed an act of cooperation so profound that it redefined what it meant for different species to work together. He opened his consciousness to the human and allied defenders, sharing not just tactical information but his actual sensory experience. Through quantum communication links that his unique neural structure made possible, every pilot in the defense fleet suddenly had access to dragon senses that could perceive threats and opportunities across impossible distances. More remarkably, he began sharing his fire in ways that transcended anything he had done during the earlier crisis. Instead of breathing flame to power individual systems, he created a network of energy that flowed between allied ships, allowing them to share power, share shields, and even share weapons systems in real time. The defense fleet stopped operating as individual vessels and became something closer to a single organism, with hundreds of bodies. Emma, now serving as her brother's tactical coordinator from Earth's command center, guided him through the battle, with the same intuitive understanding they had shared since childhood. She could not fly among the stars or breathe plasma fire, but she understood Goofy's thoughts and intentions better than anyone else in the universe. Through her, the entire defense network operated with a unity of purpose that no coalition force had ever encountered. War Commander Thex watched his superior fleet being systematically outmaneuvered by an enemy that should not have been able to coordinate effectively across species barriers. His ships were individually more powerful, his weapons more advanced, his crews more experienced. But every advantage meant nothing when facing opponents who had learned to think and act as a single unified force. The final confrontation took place above Earth itself, where Thex's flagship engaged the combined human and allied forces in a desperate attempt to break their coordination by eliminating key command vessels. It was exactly the kind of direct combat that coalition doctrine was designed for, a test of individual strength and technological superiority. But Goofy did not fight as an individual. Even when facing Thex's ship directly, he remained connected to Emma's tactical guidance and the shared consciousness of the entire defense network. He moved through space like liquid lightning, but every maneuver was part of a larger pattern that involved dozens of other vessels. His fire was devastating, but it was precisely targeted to create openings that his allies could exploit. Most remarkably, when the battle reached its climax, and Thex prepared to activate a weapon that could destroy Earth's surface, Goofy made a choice that exemplified everything he had learned about the difference between power and strength. Instead of trying to stop the weapon through superior force, he reached out to Thex's mind with the same telepathic abilities that Vera had demonstrated years earlier. But where a traditional Drakari would have used such contact to dominate or intimidate, Goofy shared something else entirely. He opened his memories to the coalition commander, showing him not the weakness that Thex expected to find, but the strength that came from choosing to fight for others rather than for personal glory. Thex experienced Emma's smile when Goofy helped her with difficult homework, felt the pride of Goofy's parents when he graduated from school, witnessed the joy of human children who had learned to see aliens as friends rather than threats. Most powerfully, he felt the absolute certainty with which Goofy had chosen to remain with his human family, even when offered power beyond imagination, the weapon powered down. Thex's flagship began withdrawing from Earth orbit and the coalition fleet followed. But before departing completely, the war commander sent a final transmission that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. "We came, here to retrieve a corrupted Drakari who had forgotten his proper place in the cosmic order," Thex announced, his voice carrying a tone that no coalition leader had ever used before. "Instead, we have encountered something that our databases cannot classify. You are not human creature, nor are you truly Drakari. You have become something new, and that new thing has taught us that perhaps our understanding of proper order was incomplete." As the coalition ships disappeared into hyperspace, Earth's defenders began the process of standing down from battle alert. The crisis was over, but more importantly, something unprecedented had been achieved. For the first time in galactic history, a major power had chosen to withdraw not because of superior force, but because of superior philosophy. Goofy returned to Earth exhausted but triumphant. The battle had proven that his choice to remain human while embracing his dragon nature had created possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. He had become the living proof that cooperation could be stronger than domination, that chosen family could be more powerful than genetic destiny. Emma met him at the landing pad, now a young woman preparing to follow her own path to college and career. They embraced as they had countless times before, brother and sister who had helped each other become more than either could have been alone. Years later, When the Interspecies Academy graduated its first class of students from dozens of different worlds, Goofy would stand before them as their commencement speaker. His final words to those young beings who were learning to bridge the gaps between their species became the motto of a new age of galactic cooperation. "I am not human," he told them, his voice carrying to every corner of the Great Hall and beyond to the stars themselves. "I am not Drakari. I am Goofy Rodriguez, and that is exactly who I chose to become. Each of you has the same choice. You can be what your genetics say you should be, or you can be who your heart tells you to become. Choose wisely because the galaxy is waiting to see what impossible things you will make possible." In the audience, Emma Rodriguez smiled and applauded for her brother, the dragon who had learned to be human, the human who had remained a dragon, and the bridge between species who had shown the universe that identity was not about what you were born as, but about who you chose to be and who you chose to love.